The kettle was screaming when Raymond walked in. I stood there staring at the steam, thinking I could leave, but I didn't move. I turned off the burner, poured 2 cups, and handed him one. My name is Margaret Ellison. I'm 76 years old. For 41 years, I stayed in a marriage that had gone quiet. Not violent, not dramatic, just quiet. My 3 children always believed I was a devoted wife. They never knew the real reason I stayed. Honestly, neither did I. Not until recently. Raymond and I married in 1973. I was 28, which felt late by the standards of the town we came from. My mother had started giving me that particular look, the one reserved for spinsters and broken appliances, somewhere around my 25th birthday. Raymond was kind. That was the first thing I noticed. Not handsome in a way that startled you, but the kind of face that became more pleasant the longer you looked at it. He worked at the county assessor's office. He liked jazz records and crossword puzzles, and he never once raised his voice at me. Not in 41 years. I want you to understand that before anything else. We were happy, I think, for the first 4 or 5 years. Not the kind of happy that shimmers, more the kind that just holds its shape. We bought a small house on Orchard Street. We planted tomatoes that mostly failed. We had our first daughter, Diane, then our son, Peter, then our youngest, Carol, all within 6 years. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, the diapers and the school plays and the Sunday dinners and the mortgage payments, Raymond and I simply became 2 people who were raising children together and occasionally passing each other in the hallway. I don't know exactly when it happened. That's the thing nobody tells you. You don't feel the warmth leaving a marriage the way you feel a fever break. It just goes slowly, like color fading from a curtain that hangs in too much sun. And one morning you look up and the curtain is just beige. You remember it was blue? You're not sure when it changed. By the time Diane was in middle school, Raymond and I slept in the same bed, but inhabited entirely separate silences. We were polite to each other. We asked about each other's days. We remembered birthdays and showed up to parent-teacher conferences side by side. From the outside and to our children, we looked like a perfectly ordinary marriage, which I suppose we were. But here is what I haven't told you yet. When I was 22 years old, 6 years before I married Raymond, I was in love with a woman named Frances Cho. She was a graduate student in the art history department at the university where I was finishing my undergraduate degree. I was working 20 hours a week in the library, reshelving books, and she used to come in on Thursday afternoons and sit at the big table near the window, the one with the crack running through the wood grain, and spread out her notes and work in this very contained, self-sufficient way that I found completely riveting. I don't know how else to say it. I would find reasons to walk near her table. I started paying attention to which books she was requesting. We became friends first, the way you do when you're both a little lonely in a new place. We ate lunch together twice a week at the cafeteria. We walked to the bus stop together in November, with our breath making small clouds. And I knew the way you know a thing in your body before your mind has the vocabulary for it. That what I felt for Frances was not what I felt for my college boyfriend, or for Raymond, or for any man I had ever spent time with. Frances knew it too, eventually. We never used any particular word for it. This was 1969, in a mid-sized city in Ohio, and there were no words available to us that didn't carry the weight of something shameful. But there was one evening in early March when we were sitting in her apartment grading papers. She'd been assigned to Mark, and the lamplight was orange and there was some record playing softly. She always had something playing. And she reached over and put her hand over mine and just left it there. And I looked at her, and she looked at me, and that was the whole of it. We had 8 months. 8 months of a kind of happiness I had no framework for. And then Frances finished her doctorate and was offered a position at a university in California, and she went. We wrote letters for a while, and then the letters got shorter, and then they stopped. And I told myself it was an episode, a chapter, something that had happened to a younger version of me, that the grown-up version would put away neatly. I married Raymond 3 years later. I chose him consciously and deliberately. I chose the life I thought I was supposed to want. And in the choosing, I told myself a story about Frances, that it had been a friendship that got confused, that it wasn't real in any lasting way, that the right circumstances and the right man would quiet whatever it was inside me that she had touched. Raymond never knew, not once in 41 years. My children never knew, never had any reason to suspect, because I was very good by then at folding myself up small and fitting into the shape of a life that made sense to people. But here is the thing about a secret you keep from everyone, including yourself. It doesn't disappear. It waits. By the time our children were grown and out of the house, Raymond and I had arrived at a kind of arrangement that I imagine is not uncommon. We occupied the same home with a certain practiced courtesy. We watched the same television programs. We ate dinner together every night. He did the dishes and I folded the laundry, and we moved through the house, like two pieces of furniture that had been placed in complementary positions. There was no cruelty in it. I want to keep saying that. Raymond was never unkind to me, and I hope, was never unkind to him. But I stayed, not because I loved him, not in the way I should have, and not because I was afraid to leave. I stayed for a reason that took me decades to understand, and the reason was this. If I left Raymond, I would have to explain why. And if I explained why, even to myself, I would have to face what I had been since I was 22 years old. What I had been since that Thursday afternoon in the library, when a woman with a cracked leather notebook sat down at a table near the window and looked up at me. I was afraid of the truth, not of what the world would do with it, though that fear was present too, but of what it would mean about all those years, every decision. Every morning I woke up next to a man I was fond of but not in love with. Every moment I had spent performing a life instead of living one. Our daughter Carol called me one evening in 2008. She was 31 by then, going through her own difficult marriage, and she asked me directly, the way Carol always did things, no circling, straight at the thing. She said, "Mom, were you ever actually happy with Dad?" And I held the phone, and the kitchen was very still, and I said, "We had a good life, Carol." We did, which was true, and also not an answer to her question. It wasn't until Raymond passed in 2014 that I finally stopped running from it. He had a series of small strokes over the course of a year and a half, and I cared for him through all of it. I was 70 years old, managing his medications and his doctor's appointments and his dignity, and somewhere in that year and a half I found, to my genuine surprise, that I did love Raymond, not with urgency or passion, but with something real, something that had grown in the back of the garden while I wasn't paying attention. The love you develop for someone whose socks you have washed for 40 years. The love that comes from witnessing a person's ordinary days. I held his hand when he died. I meant it. But after, in the months after, when the house was quiet in a way it had never been quiet before, I started talking to a therapist for the first time in my life. I was 70, recently widowed, and sitting in a beige office on Tuesday afternoons telling the truth finally, without managing the shape of it for anyone. I said Francis's name out loud to another person for the first time in nearly 50 years. I want to try to describe what that was like. You know how in winter, when a room has been closed up for a long time, you open the window and the air that comes in is cold, but also unmistakably fresh, and the stuffiness you'd stop noticing rushes out all at once? It was something like that. Not relief exactly, not grief exactly, something larger than either of those, something that felt like being seen by yourself. I am not going to tell you that I regret my marriage. I had 3 children I love more than anything I have ever encountered. I had grandchildren. I had a life with texture and weight and real moments in it. I had Raymond, who was, in his way, a good man. But I will tell you this, the reason I stayed was cowardice of a particular kind. The kind that disguises itself as practicality. The kind that says, this is fine, this is enough, this is what people like you do. And I believed that story so completely that I eventually forgot it was a story. What I know now at 76 is that the secret wasn't really about Francis. The secret was about the permission I never gave myself. Not to love who I loved, but to be known. To let the people closest to me hold the actual shape of who I was. My children know now. I told them 2 years ago, one at a time. Each conversation the hardest I've ever had, and also somehow lighter than I expected. Carol said, Mom, I've known something was missing in your life for years. I just didn't know what it was. And I sat with that she had felt the absence without knowing its name, that even my silence had its own shape, visible to people who loved me. I think about Frances sometimes. I have no idea what became of her. I have looked the way you look carefully when you're not sure you want to find something. I found nothing. She is either living quietly somewhere or she isn't living at all. And both of those possibilities sit in me with equal gentleness now. Maybe you've been carrying something like that too. Not the same thing, but something you decided years ago was too large or too complicated or too late to say out loud. Something you folded up and put in a back drawer because the life you were living had no obvious place for it. There is a particular kind of tiredness that comes from carrying a thing alone for 40 years. I know what it weighs. I know the particular way your shoulders learn to compensate. The kettle on the stove that evening, the one Raymond walked in on, the one I was staring at, that was a Tuesday in November of 1987. I was 42. Diane was 13. Peter was 11 and Carol was 7, and they were all doing homework at the kitchen table, and Raymond had just come in from work, and everything in my life was exactly as it had always been. I turned the burner off. I poured 2 cups, and outside, it had just started to snow. The first snow of the season coming down past the window in the quiet, patient way that snow does when there is no wind to hurry it. I watched it for a moment before I turned away.